Hello again, and welcome to our next presentation. I hope you all are enjoying this conference as much as I am. This new, the presentation is going to happen now. It's about how not to start a Python user group. You heard right, how not to start a Python user group, and starting a local a Python user group is really hard, and keeping it running month after it's even harder. So in this presentation, we'll be looking around some ways of how not to run your own Python user group based on the experience of the speakers. For the speaker, we have a Joseph Riddle, who is a software engineer in Spokane, Washington. Python was his first programming language he ever used almost 10 years ago, but it was not up to last year that he started using it professionally. He became the organizer for the Spokane Python user group in the spring of 2021, right in the middle of COVID, and he enjoys long walks on the beach, candlelit dinners, and writing sonnets about Python code. Thank you very much, Joseph, for being with us, and it's all yours.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate the introduction. As mentioned, I am Joseph, but I'll actually start somewhere else. We'll go back to March of 2021 is where we'll kick off this presentation. So in March of 2021, one morning, as a lot of people do, I woke up and checked Facebook and just kind of checked a few groups I was a part of. And one of those groups was a local technology group here in Spokane, Washington. And there I saw a post where someone was asking for someone to step up and become the new organizer for the Spokane Python user group. And kind of curiosity got a hold of me, and so I decided to open up the link and see how far I could get before I would hit some sort of roadblock where it wouldn't let me become the organizer. I just wanted to see what would happen. And so I opened the link, and I'm taken to meetup.com for the group. And I wasn't even a member of the group at the time, honestly. And so I joined the group, and it was free to join, and so I gave them my details. And after becoming the member, all that was left to become the organizer, even though I had literally just joined, was to give them some credit card details. And so I whipped out my wallet and typed in my credit card details, and just like that, I was the new organizer for the Spokane Python user group. My fellow Pythonistas, this is how not to start a Python user group, or in my case, how to pick one up. As mentioned, my name is Joseph Riddle, and I am a software engineer here in Spokane, Washington, at a company named Intelitect. And I've been the Spokane Python user group organizer for about the last year, and also host many of the events. I started working professionally about 2 or 3 years ago, but it wasn't until the last year and a half that I started using Python for my projects at work. For those of you not familiar with Spokane, it's on the east side of Washington, about 4.5 hours east of Seattle and about half an hour west of Idaho. It's famous for a few things, including an iron goat that you can feed garbage, a 100-year-old carousel, and the ubiquitous phrase, Spokane doesn't suck. So come visit anytime, it's really great. Today we're going to dive into some examples, as mentioned, of how not to start a Python user group. I've made a lot of mistakes over the last years in trying to organize and host user group meetups. And so my goal is that I can share some of these examples with you all, my fellow PyCascades, Pythonistas, in hopes that if you are so bold to host or organize your own Python user group, that I might showcase a few of my mistakes that you might not make the same ones. My goal is to have a little humor, hope we can laugh together, but also that you would learn a few things. Just a forewarning for the next slide. I am a software engineer, not a graphic designer, not an illustrator. I was never good at art class. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce you to Stan. Stan is a snake, as you can tell. Any resemblance he bears to an upside-down golf club is purely coincidental. He is a snake, and his name is Stan, as you can see. Stan's going to be helping me showcase a few of the examples I'm going to talk about today. Most of my slides are little pictures or cartoons of Stan and sort of some of the mistakes that he's making in his own Python user group. And my goal is that you would leave and be able to go out and hopefully start your own Python user group. Ours for Spokane is called SPUG, Spokane Python User Group. So maybe you start LUPUG, CPUG, NYPUG, or NOPUG, which is obviously short for New Orleans Python User Group. Um, Now, one thing you might be wondering is, what is a user group? What is this phrase that I keep throwing it around? Maybe you haven't heard of one, but if you're here at the conference, you might have. Put simply, though, a user group is just a group of people who share a common interest in a technology-related thing: Python, C#, Java, all sorts of different language or technologies, maybe Salesforce. The Python wiki describes user groups as somewhere that intermediate and advanced users share their use of the language and learn new tricks. Importantly, they also welcome beginners and help them step up and become part of the culture. It is a great place to ask for help and socialize with other people with a similar interest. Meetings are usually about once every month, sometimes bi-monthly, depending on the user group. And they are very informal, open to everyone. So with that being said, we're going to jump in and talk about how not to create a user group. So one thing you certainly don't want to do when you're maybe creating your own Python user group is check and see if there's already an existing user group. I know software developers, and something they love to do is deprecate legacy code, just come in and sweep it away. And so if we're figuring out what not to do, that's step number one. We're going to not check if there's any existing user groups, and we're just going to go ahead and create our own. You could even go on the Python wiki, if you were so bold, and edit it. I think pretty much anyone can create a request to edit the wiki, so that's what we've done here. This is the section on the wiki page for local Python user groups, and as you can see, we've added our way better Python Spokane user group. Went ahead and crossed out Python Spokane because we're new and cool. And here Stan's going to help us just with a little bit of example. This is what happens when you have the great idea. There's already 5 things, or these 5 user groups, or maybe 5 programming languages, and we're going to create the one to rule them all. And this is what happens. Now we have 6 user groups. And so thank you, Stan, for showcasing this wonderful example. One other thing, when you're creating a user group, and if you are in person, is try not to lock the attendees out. I wish I wasn't speaking from experience on this one, but I am, unfortunately. That was a rough night. We're going to talk about now how not to create a website. Maybe you've got your user group created and you want to start getting the word out about where to join, how to participate. And so we're going to talk about what not to do when you're creating a website for your user group. In the spirit of the Zen of Python, there should be one and preferably only one way to do something. We'll pull out the one way to create a website in Python. So we'll reach for Django or Flask or FastAPI or MarkDocs or http.server, the one way to do it, and we're going to get to work. And so 20 minutes later of working with HTML, and then another 4 hours of working with CSS, because we're Python devs and we don't know the wizardry that is CSS, we've created this awesome website that hopefully you can all see. Maybe we even threw in some Angular, little React, little Vue, just for fun. But now we've created this great website. Way better, looks like maybe we spelled something wrong, Spokane Python user group. Now, since we're talking about what not to do, this website looks pretty good. I would maybe want to join this group, but let's skip forward in time, maybe a year or so. We're privacy and security conscientious Pythonistas, and so we did add a SSL cert, so this is a secure website that our Pythonistas could go visit. But a year down the road, we've kind of forgotten about the website, and this is maybe what it looks like. Ooh, your computer may have a virus. Call 888 blah, blah, blah to get another virus. So what we didn't do in this case is we didn't stay up to date on our SSL certs. We let them expire. We forgot to renew the domain name, and then some other company came in and bought it. And now the official wiki page is pointing to a website that is full of viruses. So that is definitely what not to do when you're creating a website for your Python user group. And towards the end, we'll come back and talk about some maybe better approaches you could have taken. But for now, let's just move on to the next topic, which is how not to find a location. We are still living in COVID pandemic, so maybe this is a little less applicable at the moment, but I'm still going to talk about it, and maybe it'll be useful a little bit down the road. With that being said, we've got our website up and running. We've created the group on the wiki, maybe on meetup.com, and we've even hosted our first online event maybe. But now it's time to take things in person. So we're going to do the thing that you should certainly do when deciding where to host an in-person location, and that is go to Applebee's. Yeah. Here we can see Stan is ready. He's jazzed. He's got his presentation on lock, and all these other wonderful snakes are just trying to eat their food, and they don't really want to be a part of it. And what we didn't do up front is even phone ahead, maybe ask Applebee's or any other chain restaurant will do in this scenario to let them know that we're going to bring a moderate-sized group of Python devs who are all going to be talking and presenting. We didn't phone ahead. We didn't do that. And so maybe we got kicked out of the Applebee's. That's definitely what not to do. Though it might be a good recruitment strategy. Sometimes I like to go to my local restaurants and just ask people if they've ever used Python, but that's not what to do. Another thing we want to talk about is how not to get people to come, because what's the point of a user group if you don't have anyone there except you? Maybe our last meetup, we got kicked out of Applebee's after it was just us and our friend Chad. So you decide that maybe we should figure out how to reach out to people. So we start messaging our friends overwhelmingly, just spamming everyone we know, LinkedIn, Facebook Messenger, iMessage, Signal, all the different things. In person, we're asking them, hey, can you come? And we don't do any ads. Our website's probably broken at this point, and this is what happens. It's 6 o'clock, Spug's ready to go, Stan's got his presentation on lock, and it looks like after 15 minutes, no one showed up, and Stan's just there by himself. So Stan's not too happy at this point. So here's what we do now. Stan's decided that maybe just texting everyone he knows and harassing them isn't the way to go. So Stan goes and joins Reddit, and maybe he goes on Wall Street Bets, maybe he goes on all sorts of random subreddits, and he's just blasting, join Spokane Python user group. And as these subreddits are obviously unrelated to what Stan is talking about, he gets a couple ban hammers. And so after that, he decides to just stop advertising, period. So that's what not to do when you're trying to advertise your meetup. Next thing we're going to talk about is how not to decide what to do at your meetup. So maybe you were able to successfully get a couple people to come, and now you're trying to plan. All right, I gotta pick a topic. I gotta figure out what we're going to talk about, maybe what I'm going to present, and so we'll talk about that a little bit. One thing you definitely shouldn't do when deciding what topic you might present about at your meetup is just decide everything yourself. The mentality that you're the organizer, you're the host, you're just going to decide everything doesn't really promote community, doesn't really promote people wanting to come to what you're doing. So that's what not to do. Another thing that you might not want to do is send out a survey, and it's hard enough alone getting people responding to surveys. Trust me, it's hard. Sometimes maybe even incentivizing them helps. But you send out a survey, you get some good responses. Maybe everyone wants to talk about machine learning. They're really interested in it. What's sklearn? What's PyTorch? What's machine learning? I don't know what these things are. And so we are standing in our infinite wisdom, take all this wonderful feedback we've gotten, and we decide we're going to talk about crypto mining. So another example of what not to do is just ignore any suggestions you may getting. That's rude, and it's hard to get people to take the time to respond. And so when you are fortunate enough to get people responding to your surveys and they're actually talking about, hey, this is something I would love to learn, love to be taught, or just discuss, take those seriously. And so don't ignore those. Another thing we're going to talk about is how not to find another organizer. You've hosted a few meetups now maybe at this point, and you're starting to feel the burn, feel the stress of organizing everything by yourself, maybe even hosting most of the meetups because you haven't been able to find other people to host or talk at them. And you ponder if maybe it's time to find someone else to help you organize. And so what you do is you message all of your friends. We're kind of back to trying to get people to join, but here we've messaged our friend Rebecca, Chad. We got a message from Grandma. We've also messaged Zoe, Alberto, some random 509 number that just happened to be in our phone. And as you can tell, we have no responses. So what not to do is, again, just harass all the people you know. you probably want to be a little selective about people you'd like to help you organize. Probably try and find people who are dependable, who you know have a shared interest in Python, and you don't want to harass all your friends again. Another thing you might not want to do is decide that you're cool, you've got this, you can just organize everything yourself indefinitely, because life happens, and sometimes you might not be able to organize the event, and having the event still go on is definitely important. Another thing we're going to talk about is how not to prepare for a meetup. This is a personal favorite slide of mine. Here, Stan has had a blissful 22 days to start getting ready for his meetup, and he instead ignored every single day and waited till the day before to start preparing. Maybe even the day of, but in this case, the day before. So you've picked your topic, you're jazzed, you've finally decided, all right, we're going to talk about machine learning. A lot of people are asking about it, and you schedule it for the 23rd of whatever month it is, and you've got your enticing cover image on meetup.com. You've got the ads going on Twitter, maybe on Reddit. You've got a good interest, and then the only problem is you haven't even prepared. So it's the day before, and you started working on your presentation. And next thing you know, an emergency comes up. Maybe your brother gets in a car accident, maybe whatever happens, and here you are 24 hours later at your meetup, and you've got one slide, and you know nothing about machine learning. And you've got a good crowd who's expecting a nice discussion and some good content, and you haven't prepared anything. So that's certainly what not to do. There's times to wing things, and presenting at a meetup is usually not it. So we've covered a few examples about how not to do things. Stan, in this case, has made some mistakes. Stan the Snake is not doing too hot. His meetup's kind of on fire, and he's not loving the way things are going. So let's talk a little bit about how to start a Python user group. What do you do if you actually want people to show up and have a good time, build community, and be part of what you're doing? So we're going to kind of backtrack through some of these topics we've covered and talk about some good examples of what you might want to do. So creating a new user group. Check if one already exists. Maybe you can already join the existing SPUG or LaPug or NYPug or whatever city you're in, and you can just be a part of an awesome organization that's already happening. You can volunteer with them, and maybe they need some help, and you can be a part of another great group. Another thing you definitely want to do is register your group on the wiki. Don't cross out any other existing groups for your city, but definitely throw yours on the wiki too. And if you're using meetup.com, pretty popular platform for user groups, but there's some other ones out there, and consider adding your user group presence to that platform. Another thing we talked about was how not to create a website. And we talked about kind of some bad examples. So a couple good examples of what you should do is keep your website in sync. Keep your certs, not expired. Keep your domain name on renewal. Pretty much everything these days you can set up auto renewal. If you're using Google domains or whatever, they probably have auto renew turned on, so you're not going to accidentally lose your domain name. I believe Let's Encrypt lets you set up auto renewal, so that's great. Set that up so you don't have to worry about it. And if unfortunately someday your group does end down the road, go ahead and remove it from the wiki so that people aren't like, oh man, there's a Python user group in Spokane, and they go click on it on the wiki, and then it's just like a broken URL that maybe has ads on it. No one likes that. Another thing we talked about was finding a location, an in-person location for your group. So what you do want to do is reach out to local businesses. And when I say reach out, I don't mean just show up. I mean reach out, shoot them an email, maybe message them on LinkedIn, go in person and talk to them. And maybe there's a local working space, a shared working space, or a tech-centered business in your local area that's willing to host or even sponsor your meetup group. And definitely reach out to them and see if that's something you can do. And then obviously, COVID-19 is kind of ongoing and people are sick, consider meeting only virtually, such as PyCascades. Finding another organizer, like I said, find someone reliable, find someone you can count on. We all have stuff come up last minute, but ideally it's someone who you feel comfortable sharing the load of organizing, every month or every other month, a whole meetup event. Be kind when you're asking people, don't harass them, but do, reach out to people you think, maybe coworkers, maybe other people interested in tech. The worst they can say is no, but if they do say no, leave it be. And be understanding if your other co-organizer or even yourself has to step down. It is definitely something, if you're hosting every single month or organizing every single month, it can add up time, and life happens, so just understand that. Getting people to come, reach out to friends, reach out to colleagues. Again, be conscious about not pestering people, but maybe use advertising to your advantage. Consider reaching out to local colleges and universities. A lot of universities will have a computer science emailing list, maybe like an undergrad email list you can get on, advertise your free event. That's a great way to go about spreading the word to people who are already predisposed to being interested in technology. Use social media. Like I said, running local, low-cost ad campaigns can be an option. You definitely don't have to, but it's worth checking out, especially if you're in a big city and you want to attract more people. Creating eye-catching graphics, I would say, is definitely important. Obviously, Stan is probably the pinnacle of graphic design, but you might be able to do almost as good as Stan. There's other shapes that you could model your snake off of. There's not just golf club snakes. One final thing for trying to get people to come is there is an official Python, or there's multiple official Python channels of communication, including email lists and the wiki. And finally, what to do at the meetup, or when planning what to do at the meetup. Like I said, get feedback from meetup members, and that is hard to do. People really don't want to give feedback, so consider incentivizing them with maybe like a free JetBrains subscription or a free Python book. Do what you can to try and get some real honest feedback, and when you do get that feedback, really take it seriously. If people are willing to take the time to tell you what they might want to learn, then that's important to them, and you should be conscientious about that. One other thing is, if you can, try and inform attendees up front about the structure of your evenings or afternoons meetup. Is it going to be one long presentation? Should they bring a computer? Is it going to be a couple lightning talks, like 5 to 10 minute discussions? What's it going to be? What are they in for? And knowing that before they even show up is really super helpful. Couple final things. If you're giving a presentation, practice in advance. Everyone, maybe not everyone, but myself likes to kind of shoot from the hip and just kind of figure things out as I go, but preparing in advance is really great, and really makes the quality of the meetup that much better. Final thing, get the community involved. Find other people who are willing to give presentations. If they're not comfortable doing like a 45-minute, 60-minute presentation, see if they're willing to just talk about, or do a lightning talk, like a 5 to 10-minute quick example of something small and interesting that they found that they can just quick show and talk about, and they don't have to get up and talk for like 60 minutes. All these things should hopefully contribute. All these tips and what not to do, what to do, should contribute to the success of your meetup. Here we have a beautiful example of Stan with his friends who are there on time, and they're ready to talk about meetup. Couple final plugs. This is website, SpokanePython.com, is made in the wonderful MarkDocs Python library. It's been running for about a year now. I'd say creating a website is super fun, and if you are local to Spokane or you want to join online, definitely join the group. We've got a nice AI talk coming up in a couple weeks. Finally, thank you all for listening. I appreciate your time. Check out SpokanePython.com, and I look forward to seeing you at my next presentation, which will be titled How Not to Present at PyCascades. Thank you.
Actually, thank you very much, Joseph. One, for being here with us today and taking the time to teach us how to not to start a Python user group, but also for creating environments for Python developers or new in the Python ecosystem who want to learn, want to share their knowledge. So we really appreciate, the whole Python community really appreciate the effort that you're doing.
Thank you.
So the next presentation will be Invisible Walls, Isolating Your Python with Jeremiah Page. We will have a 15 minutes break, and so we hope to see you all back here at 3:10 Pacific time. Also, please do not forget to check Microsoft Build Tour booth here in the same venue list website. Thank you very much.